This lesson is to review your rules for properties of exponents. So, when you multiply powers, you're actually going to add the exponents. A real quick example to help refresh your memory here. So if I'm taking x to the third times x to the fifth, remember you're going to add those powers, and that would be x to the eighth. When you divide powers, you're going to subtract those exponents. Okay, so for example, real quick, if you've got x to the 10th and you divide that by x to the 5th, you would subtract those exponents of 10 minus 5 to get x to the 5th. Okay, next, when you raise a power to a power, that means you're going to multiply the exponents. So for example, if you have x to the third and you try to square that, so you're taking the power to a power, you're going to multiply and you get x to the sixth. Okay, the next rule. Anytime you have something to the 0 power, it's going to equal 1. It equals 1. So let's say I've got x to the 5th to the 0 power. That just equals 1. Okay, and the last rule. When you have a negative exponent, you're going to flip it and make it positive. So what does that really look like? Well, if you have x to the negative 5th, you're going to flip it to the bottom of a fraction, make it positive, and in this case, you would have to put a 1 on top. Now, vice versa, if you already had, let's say you had 2 over x to the negative third. Well, this time you're going to flip it up to the top. The 2 wouldn't move because it's not to a negative exponent. You would just move the x to the third to the top and make your exponent positive. So there's your rules of exponents. Now let's move on to example 1. In example 1, we have 9x to the 5th y squared over 8x to the 5th y squared. So first of all, you have to deal with the coefficients. And you have 9/8. You can't do anything with that. 9 is not divisible by 8. It can't be simplified. So we're just going to leave that here as 9 over 8. Then you've got x to the 5th divided by x to the 5th. There's two ways that you can look at that. If you're going to subtract the exponents, you would have 5 minus 5, which is x to the 0. Well, x to the 0 just equals 1. So on your equation over here, you would be taking 9 times 1, which doesn't change anything. It just leaves it as 9. Like I said, there's two ways to think about it. So you can also think of when I take something and divide it by itself, it just equals 1, so it cancels out. The y squareds are actually the same way. You've got y squared divided by y squared. So again, if you did 2 minus 2, that would equal 0. Anything to the 0 power is 1. Or y squared divided by y squared is 1. So actually, we have our final answer here of 9/8. So let's go on to example 2. Example 2 has a lot more involved. So we have 3 times xy to the negative third times 6x to the negative first y to the 5th, and that is all squared. So the first thing you want to deal with is the exponent that's with the parenthesis. we are going to take this second exponent and we're going to apply it to everything that's inside the parentheses. So for now, this 3xy to the negative third, we're not going to do anything with that yet. So if I take 6 to the second power, that means I'm taking 6 times itself. So 6 times 6 is 36. I've got x to the negative first, and I'm taking that to the second power. So when we reviewed our rules, a power to a power means you multiply. So that's going to be x to the negative second. Then you've got y to the fifth to the second power, and so 5 times 2 is 10. So we've gotten rid of that exponent that's on the outside. Now we can multiply what we have left together. So starting with the coefficients, you're going to take 3 times 36, which is 108. Then you've got x, and remember if there's no exponent on it, it's like a 1. So x to the first times x to the negative second. When you multiply, you add those exponents together, so you would get x to the negative first. Then y to the negative third times y to the 10th, you're going to add negative 3 plus 10, and you get y to the 7th. Okay, so now we've got those two multiplied together. Your last step is to make sure that your answer is simplified. You can't have negative exponents in your answer. So remember, when you have a negative exponent, you're going to flip it. So in this case, that's going to go to the bottom. 108y to the 7th stays on the top, and x goes to the bottom. So that is my final answer.